This is Scott with ECRM, and for those of you that may not be familiar with ECRM, we are a business meeting facilitator, and we bring buyers and sellers together all around the world. We do 80 category-specific sessions annually. I like to think of us as a business meeting facilitator, where we provide prearranged one-on-one private meetings between buyers and sellers. And I am joined by Roger Hayes, who is the Vice President of Business Development with Green Remedy. And we are at the beautiful Phoenician Resort here in Scottsdale, Arizona. And not only was Roger a vendor at our contract services program, but he also served as an educational session host at what we call our Thought Interaction Pods, or TIP discussions for short. And those are basically roundtable conversations. We'll have anywhere between 4 to 6, each having a unique topic. The topic of your pod discussion was hemp's role in the growth of botanical supplements, and really the importance of sourcing. So could you go into a little bit about that? Because, as quickly as this category has grown, as popular as it's become, I would assume, since it's fairly unregulated, that there's a lot of inferior product out there, and wanted to get your perspective on how that's affecting the industry as a whole.
Sure, yeah, we can kind of recap some of the things that came up in the discussion around the roundtable yesterday. As we were talking about sourcing, I was able to ask some of the participants, some of them were using other botanicals. So in doing so, what do they typically follow as far as their guidelines and best practices for sourcing? Number one, first and foremost, was testing, making sure that independent third-party testing is taking place. Because in a land of not enough regulation, we welcome more regulation to kind of thin the herd, so to speak. But what we have right now is we have the Farm Bill, both the 2014 Farm Bill is what we started under, and then the 2018 Farm Bill really did a lot to help progress it. Number one, it took hemp off that controlled substance list, or CBD off that controlled substance list, and it really opened up the expansion of farming. But the Farm Bill also leaves this up to states and states' rights, and that it has to be grown in accordance with a state-regulated growing program, extracting program, processing program, and each state is a little bit different. And with Kentucky, it started out at the University of Kentucky, was quickly passed to the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. So the Kentucky Department of Agriculture oversees the granting of licenses to grow, to process, and to sell seeds. But each state is different. And one of the things that was kind of left undone with the Farm Bill, besides some of the banking issues that a lot of CBD retailers are familiar with, is the USDA guidelines. The Farm Bill specifically points out where the USDA needs to come up with guidelines on how it's to be grown. And I know congressional leaders like Senator McConnell from Kentucky are really pressing the USDA to not set this aside. We need to get this in order, because we've got plants in the ground. We grow hundreds of acres of hemp at Green Remedy on our own farms. And so you've got farmers that already have plants in the ground from June to July, and then we'll be harvesting that in the fall. So without some of these regulations in place, there's still some gray areas.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is probably a basic question, but I bet a lot of folks still don't really understand the difference between what constitutes CBD and hemp. What's the defining factor there?
And you're exactly right, and that's why conferences like the ECRM conference, you all got in this early on in the retail space. You recognize the need from buyers and from sellers. So even today, there's some people who haven't been at past hemp-related conferences or sessions through ECRM, and we've gotten some of those questions today. And the biggest thing to realize is that hemp is cannabis and marijuana is cannabis. I often use the analogy that my golden retriever Max is a canine. Okay, he's in that canine species, but so is a wolf. Okay, same thing with capsicum. You can get capsicum in the form of black pepper, or you can get it in my favorite, Carolina Reaper or ghost pepper. So two very different substances. Same thing with hemp and marijuana. They're different cultivars of the same species. As far as the cannabis sativa, which is where the hemp kind of falls in line in its lineage. The biggest difference is THC content. And marijuana growers grow marijuana for high THC content for the purposes that their consumers want to use it for. It's not as high in CBD as when you grow it for hemp. Hemp is legally defined as the cannabis plant that is produced less than 0.3% THC. So you'll see a lot of articles that, hemp won't get you high, CBD won't get you high. It doesn't have that same psychoactive effect that THC does. And without getting too nerdy, the THC receptors in the endocannabinoid system are mostly located in the brain, and that's why you kind of get that euphoric effect for people that use THC products. And the CBD products, or some of the other cannabinoids, respond to a different receptor. They connect with a different receptor in sites throughout the body that doesn't have that same kind of heady feeling.
Gotcha.
Is that clear as mud?
So where do you see this category going? I know that it seems like everybody is sort of, say, racing to the start line.
Yes.
So what needs to happen in order to get folks past that and really start to see this proliferate on retailer shelves?
Well, there'll probably be some in the hemp industry that will send me nasty emails after I say this, but more regulation. We need more regulation. We need to know what to do so we're not operating in an area where everybody isn't on the same playing field. There's still products out there that are using imported oils that come from China, and they don't have the same testing, so you don't know that you're going to get the same efficacy. You don't even know that product may have the number of milligrams in it that it's supposed to, or that they advertise to. So regulations as far as growing practices are definitely needed. Hemp is something called a phytoremediator, meaning it soaks up what's in the soil. Most people don't know that hemp was actually used after Chernobyl to help clean the soils around Chernobyl. So you have to be, that said, you have to be careful of where you plant it. So testing, there's not enough guidelines as far as third-party testing and how this testing is coordinated, and that all tests are coming back equal. I'll give you an example. We test our product 3 times. Once out in the field before we harvest, and then once when we extract the oil, and then finally the final process before in the final product. We could send those tests, those samples out to 3 or 4 different testing companies and quite likely get different results on the cannabinoid levels through them. So until you've got some guidelines of how testing equipment is to be calibrated, that's another area. The other thing we need is for people to stop making claims. That's another area of the unlevel playing field. There's been numerous companies that have been sent letters by the FDA saying, stop calling yourself a dietary supplement. You don't fall into that category under this CFR or whatever it is. But yet they still do it because they know the FDR can't police it. So for companies like us that play by the rules and we don't make claims, it's frustrating because you lose some market share just by some unscrupulous practices by other companies.
Sure, yeah. Well, really appreciate you being here and taking part in supporting our program. Roger, thank you very much.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Scott.